My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 41 years old. It was the morning of October 3rd, 2022, 9:13 a.m., and I was standing in the kitchen of the house I had spent 4 years designing in the margins of napkins and the backs of grocery receipts. The realtor, a woman named Priya Chandran, 44, had just laid a folder on the granite island I had picked out myself. My husband, Marcus, stood beside his mother, Diane, and he had his hand on the small of her back the way a man guides someone he's protecting. "The house goes to Mom," Marcus said. "She raised me. You just decorated." Diane smiled the smile I'd been watching for 11 years. "Sweetheart," she said, "a house needs a real woman running it. Not someone playing house." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't reach for the coffee I'd made for all three of us that morning. I just watched Priya's hand hover over the folder, and I noticed something they didn't. The folder was the wrong one. What they didn't know is that I had signed something 18 months earlier, on a rainy Tuesday, in an office 2 towns over, and that the document Priya was about to open had my name on every page. They thought the house was the prize. They had no idea the house was the trap. Before I tell you how one manila folder ended a marriage and a matriarchy in the span of 4 minutes, please take a second to like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from right now. I grew up in Cadillac, Michigan, in a narrow house on Beach Street where the radiators knocked all winter and my mother kept a running ledger of everything she felt I owed her. I had a brother, Grant, 3 years older, who could do no wrong. When Grant broke a window, it was the neighborhood kids. When I got an A-, it was proof I wasn't trying. That was the family math, and I learned it early. Grant was the investment, I was the expense. The one person who saw me was my grandmother, Ruth. She lived out on Hobart Lake in a cabin that smelled like wood smoke and cedar and the peppermints she kept in her cardigan pocket. Every summer I'd go stay with her, and every summer she'd hand me a cup of coffee I was too young to drink and say, "Eleanor, you keep your own key. Doesn't matter to what. A woman who keeps her own key never gets locked out of her own life." I didn't understand her then. I was 9. But she said it every summer, and by the time I was 15 it had gone into me like a nail into soft pine. Ruth had money. Not a fortune, but real money, careful money, the kind you build across 40 years of teaching high school biology and never once buying something you couldn't pay cash for. My mother circled it like a gull. "Ruth's getting old," she'd say at Thanksgiving. "Someone will need to manage her affairs." Grant would nod, already spending it in his head. I remember one Christmas, I was maybe 17, my mother made me give Grant the coat I'd saved for. "He has an interview," she said. "You're just a girl. Girls can wear last year's things." She said it in front of everyone, and no one flinched, because in that house it was simply true. Ruth flinched, though. Ruth watched, and Ruth said nothing, and later she took me out to her car and put her own scarf around my neck. "Write down what they do," she told me. "Not to be bitter. So you remember who they are when they try to tell you they're someone else." I kept a notebook after that. I still have it. I met Marcus in 2009, at a paint store in Traverse City where I was working the register to put myself through the community college design program. He was buying supplies to fix up a house he'd inherited from an uncle, and he was charming in the specific way that men are charming when they've been told their whole lives that their charm is enough. His mother, Diane, came into the picture on the 3rd date, and she never really left it. "Marcus needs a woman who understands sacrifice," Diane told me once, early on, over pot roast. I gave up everything for that boy. Everything. You'll see. I thought she was warning me about love. She was warning me about servitude. I just didn't speak the language yet. We married in 2011. For 11 years I built a life the way you build a fire in wet wood, patiently, close to the ground, protecting the small flame with your whole body. I finished my degree. I started a homestaging business, one client at a time, driving a Corolla with 190,000 miles on it to houses I made beautiful for other people. And the whole time, in the back of my mind, was the house. Our house. The one we were saving for. Except we weren't, quite. Marcus made good money as a regional sales manager, and somehow it never went to the house fund. It went to Diane. Her roof. Her car. Her little emergencies, which came monthly. I said nothing, because Ruth had taught me that silence is a kind of savings account too. Ruth died on February 9, 2019. She was 86. At the funeral, my mother wept dramatically and asked the lawyer, before the casket was even in the ground, when the reading would be. I remember the exact moment because I checked my watch out of sheer disgust. It was 11:22 a.m. The reading was March 1st. My mother and Grant sat in the front row of the lawyer's office like children at a magic show. And then the lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Walter Kessler, 68, read that Ruth had left the bulk of her estate, $286,000, not to my mother, not to Grant, but to me. In a trust. With one condition written in Ruth's own hand, that the money be used for a home in Eleanor's name and no one else's, so help me God. My mother stopped speaking to me that day. It was the best gift she ever gave me. Here's where I have to tell you the quiet part, the part that made everything after it possible. I did not tell Marcus about the full amount. I told him Ruth had left me a little something. Because by 2019 I had 11 years of that notebook, and the notebook told me exactly who my husband was when there was money on the table. If you've ever had to keep a secret not to deceive someone, but to survive them, type key in the comments. I want to know we're not alone in this. I bought the house on April 15, 2021. 818 Cherry Bend Road, a 2-story colonial on a corner lot with a maple in the front yard that turned the color of a struck match every October. I paid $214,000 for it. I put the entire down payment from Ruth's trust, $180,000, into it, and I titled it in my name alone. Marcus signed a quitclaim deed at closing. Without reading it, because Marcus never read anything, because Marcus had spent 40 years learning that other people handled the paperwork. I told him it was for the mortgage insurance. He said, whatever's easiest, L. He was looking at his phone. Walter Kessler handled it. He'd become something like a friend after Ruth's death, the last living person who'd loved her the way I had. You're doing exactly what she wanted, he told me at the signing. You kept your own key. For 18 months, we lived in that house and Marcus called it ours and I let him. I painted it, staged it, filled it with the life I'd sketched on napkins. And Diane came over more and more, running her finger along my countertops, telling me which of my choices she'd have made differently. Then, in September of 2022, Marcus sat me down and told me, gently, the way you'd deliver a diagnosis, that he'd been thinking. That Diane's health was declining. That the smart, family-minded thing was to put the house in Diane's name, so she'd have security, so she could live with us, so the family could be whole. You'd still live here, he said, generously. You'd just stop being so territorial about it. I said I'd think about it. I said maybe we should have a professional walk us through the transfer. I said I knew a good realtor. I called Priya Chandran that night. Then I called Walter Kessler. And then I did nothing for 2 weeks except make coffee and smile and let them believe I was folding. The morning of October 3rd, they arranged the whole thing like a coronation. Diane wore pearls. Marcus wore the good watch. They sat at my island and they told me, in front of Priya, exactly who they were, in the language I now spoke fluently. A house needs a real woman running it, Diane said. Not someone playing house. You just decorated, Marcus said. I said nothing. I stood by the sink where the light came in. Priya opened the folder. She looked at the first page, and then she looked up, and there was a small, professional pause, the pause of someone realizing the room does not know what she knows. I'm sorry, Priya said. I think there's some confusion. There's nothing to transfer today. Diane laughed. Of course there is. My son's signing the house over to me. Mr. Vance can't sign this house over to anyone, Priya said. He doesn't own it. The property at 818 Cherry Bend Road is titled solely to Eleanor Vance. Has been since April 2021. He signed a quitclaim deed at the original closing waiving any interest. The kitchen got very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator hum. Marcus said, "That's not Elle, tell her that's not right." I said, "It's right." That was all I said. Diane's face did the thing I'd been waiting 11 years to see. The smile stayed but the eyes went flat, then panicked, then furious. "You tricked him," she said to me. "You conniving little, you stole my son's house." "It was never his house," I said. "It was never even ours. It was mine. Ruth's money bought it. Ruth's name is the reason it exists." At that exact moment, 10:47 a.m., the doorbell rang. I'd asked Walter Kessler to come at 11:15, and Walter Kessler was a punctual man. He came in with his old leather briefcase and set it on the island next to Priya's folder, and he nodded at me the way Ruth used to. "I'm the attorney of record for the Ruth Delaney Trust," he told the room. "I drafted the deed. I witnessed the signature. Mr. Vance, you did read it. I watched you sign each page. Would you like to see the copy with your initials?" He opened the briefcase and laid it out. Marcus's initials, MV, 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 all the way down the margin. Marcus stared at his own handwriting like it belonged to a stranger. "I didn't," he started. "You did," Walter said, not unkindly. "You just didn't read what you were signing. That's not the same as being deceived. That's a man who assumed the paperwork didn't matter because it never had before." Diane turned on Marcus then, and this is the part people don't believe when I tell it, but it's true. She turned on her own son. "You idiot," she hissed. "You had one job. You signed away our house. You've always been useless, you know that? Just like your father." The mask didn't crack. It fell off entirely and shattered on my kitchen floor. Priya, to her enormous credit, had already gathered her things. "I don't think there's any business for me here," she said. "Ms. Vance, everything on your end is clean and in order. I'm sorry for the confusion." She looked at Diane on her way out, and all she said was, "Good luck." My mother, I should mention, was not there. But my brother Grant called that afternoon, because Diane had called my mother, and my mother had called Grant, and the phone tree of my family lit up like a switchboard. "You cheated Grandma's family out of that money," Grant said. "That was supposed to be shared." "It was shared," I said. "Ruth shared it with the person who kept her company for 40 years. You want to know who that was? Look in the mirror and it won't be you." I hung up. I did not raise my voice once. Marcus moved out on October 11th. He went to live with Diane, which I found fitting, in the house I had never once been allowed to help pay for. The divorce was finalized the following June. Because the house was mine before the marriage was tested and titled solely to me with a clean quitclaim on file, he walked away with his car, his watch, and his mother. Diane's health, it turned out, was fine. It had always been fine. The declining health had been a strategy, and strategies don't hold up well when the board gets flipped. I stayed at 818 Cherry Bend Road. I'm sitting in it now, at the island, the same one Diane ran her finger along. My staging business has 9 regular clients and I cleared $71,000 last year, more than I ever made playing house for a man who called my life's work decorating. I put $63,500 of Ruth's remaining trust into a retirement account I will never let anyone else touch. I keep my own key. Several of them, actually. I had the locks changed the afternoon Marcus left. There was one soft thing, at the end. Marcus's niece, Hannah, 19, a sophomore at Central Michigan, sent me a letter in November. She wrote that she'd watched Diane run people out of the family her whole life, and that she'd always liked me, and that she was sorry, and that she hoped I was okay. She signed it, the only Vance who's proud of you. I've kept it in the same drawer as Ruth's scarf and my old notebook. Some families you're born into. Some you build one honest person at a time. I think a lot now about doors. About the difference between a house and a home, between a key someone gives you and a key you hold yourself. For 11 years I lived inside other people's locks. I decorated their walls and softened their edges and believed that if I made things beautiful enough, someone would finally hand me the deed to my own life. Ruth knew better. Ruth knew you don't get handed the key. You keep it. From the very beginning, quietly, even when they laugh at you for it, even when they tell you girls don't get lives, they get duties. You keep your own key, and one morning the wrong folder opens, and it turns out to be exactly the right one. The maple out front is turning again. It's the color of a struck match. I made 3 cups of coffee out of habit this morning, then poured 2 of them out and drank mine by the window in the good light. I kept my own key. I did it, Grandma. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to save yourself quietly while everyone assumed you'd fold, share this video. Someone in your life might need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this.